What's up, people? For this podcast, I flew out to Seattle, Washington, and was able to sit and chat with a good friend from college who has done some great things with his life so far. He's volunteered in orphanages in several countries, worked at juvie. He's a musician and a photographer on top of all of that. His perspective is incredibly enlightening. And with that, I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with my good friend, Alex Hallett. Alex Hallett.
Courtney,
how are you?
I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm super caffeinated now.
That's right.
So this is going to be interesting as I get more and more hyped up as we go. First, let's mention where we are right now.
Seattle.
In
Welcome.
Seattle.
Welcome to the Northwest.
What am I doing?
The real deal.
What am I doing? I'm finally going places is what I'm doing. Thank goodness.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The city's pretty cool.
Yeah? What do you think?
It's nice. But like I was saying earlier to you, if it's it feels like hipsters and runaways. Hipsters and runaways. That seemed to be the main theme. Do people come here to find something in Seattle? What's the city known for?
Coffee.
The Starbucks that I'm drinking right now?
Starbucks, Microsoft, Amazon.com, Costco, Boeing.
All of those things?
All of those things are from the Northwest. And then, rock from the 90s, and then some, different musicians like
some
that.
Of everything.
So, yeah,
pretty much.
A little bit of everything.
That's really crazy.
Yeah.
That's really crazy. So let's talk a little bit about how we know each other. When's the last time I saw you? 6 years ago?
I would say, where's that show that I played down in San Diego?
Oh, in downtown.
So that was probably 6 years ago.
6 years ago. Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
We went to college together, both screenwriting majors. You have a philosophy minor?
Double major, actually.
Double. Oh,
I know, right?
Fancy.
Yeah.
You're fancy. So, yeah, I haven't seen you in a long time. But what I wanted to talk to you about, too, is or at least have you talk to people about, is what you did when you got out of college, because you kind of took a very interesting route in that job that you took, and then in the journeys that you've been on, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. I want to hear about that.
Okay. Well, straight out of college, I moved up to Bellingham, which is just halfway between Seattle and Vancouver. And I worked at Starbucks for about 2 months. And I worked at an Italian restaurant also for about 2 months. Neither of those exist anymore. The Starbucks is closed. The Italian restaurant is closed.
So it's your fault?
I mean, also the elementary school that I went to now is now a weed farm. It's like a.
You have an effect on the places that you go.
My middle school doesn't exist anymore. It's now an elementary school.
Should I be nervous?
Probably, yeah. So, where we went to college is probably going to go belly up pretty soon.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Poor Chapman.
Poor Chapman.
Poor Chapman.
If there's one word I would use to describe Chapman, it's probably not poor.
It's the last word.
Yeah.
They keep asking me for money. Do you get that stuff from them all the time?
Yeah.
They find me at work. I get mail at work.
Did I ever tell you about...
I don't know if they know my home address. Maybe that's why they sleuthed me out.
The only time I ever hit a car in my life was at Chapman in the parking garage. And I was driving an 86 Ford Ranger at the time. Named Ernie. And I was backing up, and I didn't see any car there, so I just kept backing up, and there was a car that was very low to the ground. It was a Porsche 911 Turbo, brand new. And I hit it probably at 3 miles an hour, but those things, aren't really built to withstand any impact, and so...
Did you mess it up?
Yeah, just like the rear bumper and stuff like that, but it wasn't a moving violation because it was parked. But anyways, of course, at Chapman University, are you going to back into some kid's Porsche?
They did have nice cars.
They had nice cars.
I'm still driving the same car.
Yeah.
From when I was 16.
Yeah.
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 Because a Honda Civic, and I made that deal with myself. I said, well, because it was given to me, paid off, a wonderful gift from my parents.
You still have that white Honda Civic?
I still have that white Honda Civic because I told myself I'd drive it till it stopped working. And then it kind of still works, really. So I've never had a car payment.
That's a pretty sweet deal.
But I also told myself I'm going to get a new car this year because let's get some upgrades going now.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That's how I feel.
So
continue.
So work. So after those places, I got offered a job. I worked at juvie. So
yes, tell me about that.
That was in.
I watch a lot of those prison shows. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like Lockup and things like that. I don't know why.
Yeah,
it's very interesting to me to see the stories, I guess, of the people that go through there and how they ended up in that situation.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, nothing like that. But it also certainly was not like a daycare either. Like some of my friends thought. I was just kind of a glorified babysitter. But no, I mean,
so it's not very intense.
There were certainly intense parts of it, and I think honestly, psychologically, it's a little bit more intense than if I were a correction officer next door at just the county jail, because you see a lot of kids up there that are victims of, whether it's sex trafficking or how their parents have brought them up in the world, or things like that. No home life. It's not necessarily their fault that they're 14 and they're way into drugs and or suicidal or what. And so, for the most part up there, it was just maintaining security, and usually the kids were just good. But every now and then there would be spats, or a kid would, like if a 17-year-old plays football or something and they're 6'3", 250 pounds, like that's a full grown.
That's a man.
That's a man, right? That's
there. A man.
And so if they would come in and they would be amped up on crystal meth or something like that and really want to throw down, then, which happened a couple times, then you would have to prepare for that, And so any full-time...
You got into struggles with them?
Yeah, a little bit. And any full-time correction officer up there would have to go to the police academy and get trained just for a couple weeks, but just, basic kind of hand-to-hand defensive tactics and things like that. But for the most part, I was there for 3 years, didn't have too many... really bad experiences. Doing strip searches was obviously never
not
fun.
The favorite part of the job there. Awkward.
But any kid that came up there with a drug sentence or weapons charge or was sentenced on the weekend was a mandatory strip. And certainly, like, we never laid a hand on them or anything, but you'd have audio monitors listening to you and somebody else watching you watch them. But still, it's like nobody.
You wouldn't prefer to be doing that.
I didn't prefer to be doing that. The kid didn't want to be doing that, but
that's rough.
Just part of the job that you had to do. And anyways, but it was really humbling too. And there's just a lot of it helped me kind of notice how many people are really, just fighting battles that a lot of people don't know anything about. And so kind of do my best on a daily basis to think like, hey, look, I'm not in this situation right now. And if I can help make somebody's life just a little bit better, just on a human level, just whether it's just a hi and take 5 seconds it doesn't take any more time, I don't think, to just be present with a human being and say, hey, how are you? And actually care about the response.
Yeah. Did you get a chance to get to know any of them?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, you have to keep your distance.
Sure.
But you also sometimes you're the only person that these kids would ever have a chance to like really talk to and listen. So certainly there were kids up there that were just really good kids. They just made a stupid choice, just like that's
kind of the scariest one, isn't it?
Right.
When you are a good kid and you do something just one time, you do something, you're caught in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's awful.
So you just listen to them, and some of them had it just, super rough at home. And so when that's the case, and not that I grew up in a privileged environment at all in Port Angeles, Washington, but, like middle class, working class family, and I didn't ever have to super worry about bad things happening to me or really struggling to have food on the table or anything like that. So that in and of itself is a huge blessing. But yeah, some of those kids, just the worst of the worst parents, background, and then you'd meet the parents and they would come up to do visitation, and you would know a little bit of the backstory and why the kid was there. And not that all of them were the victim of that. Some of them came from high privilege and made stupid choices, and just increased empathy and I tried to get some good out of that. And
sure, it's got to be difficult if you don't come from a good foundation.
Right.
And I'm sure, and I think everybody's got a little piece of that too, where everybody's got their own kind of like little issues.
Totally.
Or something from when they're brought up that we're all kind of struggling with. And then it's like, it's hard to even be super judgmental on people if maybe they just hit a different kind of set of circumstances that you could have possibly hit.
Right.
You know, if there was the right twist of fate.
Right.
I guess.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. So you worked there.
I was there for 3 years. And I had a chance to go to Kenya for, I don't know, about a month. And so they wouldn't give me the time off. I was still kind of low man on the totem pole even after being there for 3 years. I was kind of the last hire for a long time.
People usually stay there for a long time?
It really depends. I mean, I would say average people are probably there for 5-6 years, but there are some people that had been there since I was born, basically.
Yeah,
you know?
lifers.
Yeah, yeah. And the something that was really interesting there was, and I understand it was kind of a coping mechanism, but some of the guards up there, male and female, were kind of just callous to some of the background of some of the kids that would come up there. And it's just, I never wanted to get to the point where, you know, a kid who was sexually assaulted their whole life, that I just was numb to that, you know?
Yeah, that's the dark place to be, I think.
I think so. And so it was a good time to leave, and I wasn't granted the time off, and come to find out in like the collective bargaining agreement with the union, you had to be working there exactly 3 years or more to get all your vacation and sick pay. And I never took vacation or sick leave. And so I had probably $4,000 saved up. And so I was 1 week short of that. And I'd already booked my ticket. And I didn't know.
Yeah.
And because I didn't read page 137, paragraph 2.
God, that's something somebody should tell you, you know?
But it was,
you would hope.
So anyways, so I quit that job. And then I went to Kenya for a month, just to volunteer in an orphanage there, and that was my first introduction to that, and also to volunteerism. And
what led you to want to do that, or what program was that?
That was through a company in New Zealand called IVHQ, and they seem to be like kind of the most hands off and the most economical as far as the travel goes. But I quickly learned that volunteerism is kind of is become a thing. And by volunteerism, I mean people who take, you know, either a gap year after they graduate college or high school before they go to college, and they go, you know, volunteer in, say, an orphanage in Kenya or Cambodia or something. But they don't really, they're not there to actually lend a hand. They're there to pad their resume or make it look good,
right.
For their friends back home. And that really got under my skin. So over the next couple of years, I formulated a plan to crowdsource and put all my life savings into a trip to travel the world for a year and volunteer in orphanages around the world and live with the caretakers or, you know, the kids, and spend every day there and really just get their stories in person, and also just observe when groups like IVHQ would send people to volunteer at these places, like what the reality of that was, and how that impacted the kids, or sometimes didn't impact the kids based on how the orphanage was run. And, you know, because some places it would be, you know, the kids would be kind of viewed as like an attraction, like you would go see a lion at a zoo or something.
Yeah, that's crazy.
You know, and that's not good.
No.
You know, nobody's being helped with that. And so, for example, like in Cambodia, and stop me if I'm rambling, but
no, this is for you to ramble. Absolutely, please talk as much as you want.
So in Cambodia, for example, like, and I don't know the correct number off the top of my head right now, but there were 300 orphanages 5 years ago, let's say, and now there's 600. And there aren't more orphan kids. I mean, the Khmer Rouge and Pol Pot and all of that was, you know, a couple decades ago. There are just more people who see that operating something that looks like an orphanage can be profitable, because you see all these kind of affluent seeming, you know, Westerners coming to these places and donating a lot of money. So then somebody that lives next door will say, oh, they're making a lot of money doing that, and so I'm going to go into a rural village and tell, you know, a farm family, like, hey, let me take your kid into town, I'll give him a good education, and so on and so forth. And so then ends up being
it's such a wild way to help.
Right?
Help?
Right?
Mark?
Exactly. So then I was very much
coming from such a place of ego and
totally. So the first couple months on that trip in Vietnam and Cambodia, just I learned really quickly how much of a dark side there is to that, volunteering through these companies that, say that you're going to go really help, and people put on their superhero cape for 2 weeks and think they're going to save some poor little kid in this country, and it's a very condescending thing. And I think some people have good intentions but don't realize sometimes that they're contributing to a greater problem, and in trying to address the issue, they're actually making it worse sometimes.
Yeah, so it's probably a mix of some people that do it to look good or to put on their resume, then maybe a little bit sometimes the people that are going out to maybe try and find meaning, to try to make a difference, and then they end up at a place where they're really not.
Exactly.
It's not what they meant it to be.
Yeah. And so if somebody volunteered and tried to make it if one way or another it was about them, they shouldn't go.
Yeah.
Because the trip isn't about you. And the documentary that I'm working on, and that was the purpose of the trip, was just to get the story of the kids and their caretakers and film this documentary and take a ton of pictures and write a lot about it.
The pictures are amazing.
Thanks. Was just to capture that and present their story to the world with no filter, not having to go through any big company or anything like that, just direct from person to person. Yeah. And so those are all in the editing phase right now as a mini series. So South Africa has its own episode. Kenya has its own episode. Peru, Romania, they all have their own.
How many places have you been?
Well, so on that trip, it was Vietnam, Cambodia, Nepal, each for a month. Kenya was for 2 months. South Africa was for 6 weeks. Romania was for 5 weeks, and then Peru was for 2 months. And I wouldn't take out my camera or anything like that until I had been there for a couple weeks and really
got a little bit of rapport.
Exactly.
Some relationship with everybody that's there.
Yeah.
And you said you were living with the caretakers?
It really depended in each place. And so in Vietnam and Cambodia, I went through that same organization, and was just at almost like a hostel, but just for volunteers.
Okay.
Near the different orphanages. And then in Nepal, the Nepal one was great, even though it was through that company. And that's because I think they kind of distanced themselves a lot from that company. And so I was staying at a kind of a family-owned motel really close to the orphanage. Beyond that, I just booked everything on my own, and I would just land in a place and not know anybody, and through word of mouth find places to go. And in Kenya, I'd already been there, and so it was really cool to go back and see the kids, same orphanages 3 years later, and so see kids that were, born HIV positive, that were just, kind of just little 5-year-old kids running around on the playground and just pushing each other down and climbing on the jungle gym and stuff. That was really cool to see.
The normalcy still. Are they aware? Do they understand that?
I think understand as much as
much as they can.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah.
And not all of them in Kenya, where I was in Kenya, have HIV or anything like that. But yeah, it was just it was good to see them again. Mm-hmm. And South Africa, which is the first episode that I'm just about done with, was a place named Kosi's Haven. I hesitate to call it an orphanage. It's a safe place for women and children who are impacted by HIV or AIDS. So every woman and child there either has HIV or full-blown AIDS, or the kids have been orphaned or impacted by it. So parents have died from it. And it was opened by a woman named Gail Johnson, who is a white woman in South Africa, who adopted a black boy. And this is very shortly on the heels of apartheid. So race tensions there's still, a lot of race tensions there, but right on the heels of that. And so that was a very unpopular thing for her to do in her neighborhood with all of her white friends. And so a lot of people disowned her, and she said, well, okay, well, you're clearly not my friend then if you can't. So
that makes no sense.
So she adopted this boy who was born HIV positive, and his mom had full-blown AIDS and passed away really quickly. And anyway, so long story short, he kind of became an international icon, and became the first face of AIDS in South Africa, really, to make it real. The government denied the existence of AIDS at the time. President Mbeki didn't think that HIV caused AIDS.
Really? Okay.
And so here is this 11-year-old boy, and World AIDS Day was in South Africa that year. And so he spoke in front of a live audience of 10,000 people and in front of 60 million people on TV.
Wow.
And he was full-blown AIDS at the time. So he, you know, picture an 11-year-old who weighs 45 pounds.
Gosh.
More courage than I could ever hope to have in my entire life put together.
That's wild.
And so he became, Robin Williams flew out to meet him. Peter Jennings went out there. Nelson Mandela called him, you know, like one of his biggest heroes. And so this place in Nkosi's Haven was opened up in his memory because that's what he really wanted, was a place for people who have HIV not to feel ostracized and stigmatized by it. So being there was a really incredible experience, and I lived on the property in one of the cottages, and with, you know, moms and caretakers and everything have their own cottages there too. So just that whole trip was just a way to kind of get the whole story from as much as I could. You know,
Sure.
By whole story I mean one
As much
tiny
as one can gather.
one drop in the
Sure.
bucket.
But that's so much more than most of us understand about that.
Well,
Most people they have no concept.
I mean, I hope, you know, it. What I hope for with it is just to raise a lot of awareness about how we live around the world, and how that most of these kids in these places are really just happy-go-lucky kids. It's not like when you turn on TV and there's an infomercial for.
They want to create a lot of pity.
Exactly, and none of these kids want to be pitied.
Yeah,
they just like
no one does.
Yeah, exactly.
No one does.
Yeah.
I can't think of people that want to be pitied.
Yeah, just hold my hand and let's go collect bugs, or let's go play tag, or, you know, stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's the story that I really wanted to observe, and the story that I wanted to get was the reality of the situation. And the reality of the situation was these kids were just normal kids, and I think the view in the West is kind of skewed anyways.
Sure. And I mean, like, what does that teach you about happiness too?
That you don't need much for it.
Yeah, because if you think how many people here, or we have a lot of amazing things around us. You know, we've got these iPhones, and you know, we have coffee around every corner and food around every corner, and so much more than we could possibly imagine. You think sometimes maybe we create issues for ourselves because all of the basics seem to be taken care of, and there's a little bit of a loss of gratitude for those types of things.
Absolutely, yeah.
So when you go over there and you can see these people living, you know, a lot simpler, they don't have as much as we have, and still being very happy for the most part, or finding happiness still in that way. It's got to be a little eye-opening.
Well, there's happiness in simplicity, and there's happiness. I think if people are really honest with themselves, no matter how much money you have, the most happiness that you have in your life are through experiences and interactions and moments where you really, you know, feel your humanity with somebody else. It's connection. Exactly. It's connection. Your happiness isn't scrolling through your iPhone and looking at your apps for the 50th time in a day. I mean, mine. I mean, no. Mine is doing that looking on my Galaxy. Yeah. So, you know, that's my happiness.
Different.
Exactly.
It's different.
Exactly. You know, not to get like all high and mighty, but I do think as a society, and by our society I mean, you know, kind of Western or American society, I think there will be a pendulum swing back to kind of minimal, you know, not just having to consume so much. Yeah. Because I think, I mean, a lot of the advent of all these things are brand new. I mean, when you and I were born, the internet didn't exist. You know, I mean, to the extent that it does today. You actually had to. No, yeah, really. If you wanted to, we didn't have access to it until we were at least, I don't know, middle school, maybe. Probably, yeah, something like that. If you wanted to, you know, see a movie, you had to look it up in the newspaper. You can just go to Rotten Tomatoes and say, I don't want to see this because it has. People didn't have cell phones. Yeah, if you wanted to go out on a date, if I had to wanted to go on a date with a girl, I had to call the house. I know. I'd be like, probably talk with the dad. I know. I'd be like, you can't call between this time and this time because my dad's not going to be home. Oh, you were a little. Yeah, I can't. Well, I just couldn't have my dad pick up the phone. Mm-hmm. My dad doesn't want to meet people I date.
To this day.
Oh, okay.
To this day, it would make him nervous. So back then, surely he wouldn't want a little boy called in the house.
Right.
You know, do you ever feel like we're in a strange age group, though? Because we were young enough to see, well, we're old enough to have seen before the internet, before cell phones. We kind of lived in that phase. Mm-hmm. And then we grew up with these phones and everything coming in and the internet. Mm-hmm. We used to have to go to libraries. And stuff, you know, before now libraries are like weird places where kind of strange things happen.
I love the library.
Yeah, well, I like the idea of them, except for, you know, so every time I go in there, there's kind of some creepy people.
Okay.
I run into the creepy people often. Mm. But yeah, like it almost creates this weird feeling of nostalgia for like simpler times. Mm-hmm. We were in like this weird crossover phase, whereas like kids that are a little bit younger than us didn't experience all of the rest of that other stuff.
Right.
You know, I think we were outside a little bit more than probably kids are now. You know, like video games were just kind of coming up, but we were already, you know, I think I got my first video game at like 5, maybe. I didn't play all the time. I was still out and about. And I'm like, I feel like that's just, there's a big shift between, even though, you know, like I'm 30 or 31. If I talk to somebody that's 21, we have really, really different mindsets almost. And it makes me feel old in a sense that it's like I'm longing for some past time.
Right.
That was simpler.
Right.
Even though I'm just 30. It's because there's been so much change in this tiny period of time. It's a strange thing to have to adjust to, I think, as people.
I think it's crazy that there are kids who, I sound old saying kids, but there are people. I
know, I use that and I felt ridiculous immediately.
There are people now that just got their driver's license that were born after 9/11 happened. I mean, that's wild.
Yeah.
Right? And
time is strange.
So.
Time is strange.
Yeah.
Very confusing. Very confusing.
Right.
But yeah, I definitely feel like there's a definite change in like our psyche from that, living in those two different phases, you know?
I was reading about I can't remember where I was reading it. I think actually Aziz Ansari. I think maybe in Modern Romance? Isn't that the name of his book?
Ooh, maybe.
Really good. Recommend it to everybody. But I think it was in there. He was talking about the endorphin high that comes from getting like a notification on your phone is very similar to a high that you get like just taking just a quick drag off of a cigarette or anything like that, or taking a drink or anything. And personally, for myself, I feel that pull, and it's a scary thing because I don't want that, and I try to.
It's designed to make us feel that way.
Totally.
Yeah.
But I don't. I would say I don't want it to get to that point, but it's already at that point, and I feel like cell phones are supposed to be a very useful tool for us. They're not supposed to make us into the tool.
They're not supposed to be using us.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they use us a lot, I think.
Just from personal experience, I would say, yeah, they use me. Like, I don't need to wake up and first thing in the morning check my email and check how many likes my last shot on Instagram got. Like, what does that really matter? It doesn't.
I know, but it's this outer validation that we're all kind of hooked up in, and it's like you're almost taught like people are judging you by how many likes you're getting on something. Like, oh, that one, they're getting a lot of likes on their stuff. People like them,
right? And so I think that comes down to and that comes down to in our society too, just the pursuit of fame and wealth and wanting to be known. And if you're always on that treadmill of achieving that, you're placing stock into something that's in ultimately everybody else's control.
Yes, and that's when things get dangerous.
Absolutely, yeah.
When you're placing your own value and your self-worth in the hands of other people, and in this world that we live in, a lot of times the hands of people you don't know.
Right.
Most of these people you don't know.
Yeah.
And you're going to base your self-worth off of that?
Right.
It'd be so quickly taken away from you. It's a dangerous game to play.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about happiness.
Right.
And trying to figure out how to be comfortable with yourself.
Right.
It's like the worst way to do it, and there's some, there's some people that their goal is to be famous. It's not to be famous for something in particular because they're so good at something, because they have a skill that they really want people to know. Some people just want to be famous and get whatever comes with that, whatever perks comes with that. So that's a little nerve wracking because we do live in this time where like you can be a YouTube celebrity.
Which is crazy to me. I mean, I get it. But
yeah, people get famous for their personalities.
yeah,
Essentially. And some of them have skills, absolutely. Some of them have skills in something and they're sharing that. And some of them are super funny and whatever.
some of them are Alex Jones.
So, yeah.
So some of them don't have skills. Some of them are just
well, you know, there's all kinds out there. But
very
it's an
toxic
interesting...
people. Yeah.
You have the ability to say whatever you want to everyone in the world now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's all this access.
Yeah.
Which is great.
There's the constant paradox of choice, too.
But yes.
And which I think is another thing that gives us anxiety. And I think sometimes, personally speaking, you know, even my cell phone feels like a little bit more of a safe space.
Absolutely.
Because I'm not inundated. If I'm specifically choosing what I'm looking at rather than... It's a very weird thing to say that, you know, I feel pressured into how many shows are on Netflix that I want to watch. And so then my favorite show, or my most reliable show on Netflix, is scrolling through the queue, seeing what is newly added, seeing what are added by genre, and then it's 45 minutes later and I'm ready for bed. You know, I'm not going to watch anything.
But I just had to see what was on there.
Totally.
Add it to my list. I'll get to it.
Exactly.
I'll get to it.
I never will.
Yeah, the pressure of getting to it.
I'm never gonna go rewatch Sliders and Quantum Leap. I
No?
know I won't. And they've been sitting in my queue for 7 years.
Just in case.
Just in case I want to get around to them.
Just in case you need to get to it. You never know.
Yeah. And so everything is instant. Everything's at our fingertips. And I think that cheapens most things too.
Yes.
I mean, I remember like when DVDs came out and wanting to like get the whole set of the X-Files.
Yeah.
And back then it was, you know, $300 or whatever. And now
I've got a massive collection of stuff I'm hauling around when I move now.
Totally.
Lord of the Rings DVDs collections.
Totally.
Extended editions, you know.
Totally. And if that's being like broadcast on TV, you're not going to go put the DVD in, even though it'd be better quality and no commercials. You'd be like,
no.
Well, it's on, so I'm just going to go watch
Stream it.
Yeah.
You don't have to have anything physical
streaming,
anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's the other thing, too. You know, I went through... a lot of my childhood belongings were stored in my aunt's garage for the longest time.
Uh-huh.
I hadn't seen them in forever. So boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff from my childhood. And then my aunt had to move, and all of a sudden I had to haul my childhood back into my house.
Right.
Which was this strange, I don't know, it just gave me this strange feeling to have all of my stuff from the past all of a sudden in my present.
Right.
And to be able to go through it. But I mean, I'm looking at stuff that I thought was so important and that I was hauling around, and at like big CD collections, just so many CDs. And I remember it just reminded me like how attached I was to having the physical item.
Oh, yeah.
The physical item was so important. I wanted the CD case and I wanted the little booklet and the CD. And I remember when we were transitioning to like MP3s.
Oh, yeah.
I was so resistant to it. I still wanted to buy the disc. I didn't want to download it.
Well, I think that's
not, I want all the... I gotta have the real thing.
I think that's coming back too, though, with vinyl. I mean, vinyl last year outsold digital music.
Did it?
Yeah, which is wild.
That's surprising.
Right?
That's surprising.
But so I think again that's that pendulum swing back to kind of a simpler and I like vinyl a lot. So we're next to Capitol Hill, so I can go ahead and be kind of hipster right now. But I mean, I do. I mean, it sounds awesome. It does
sound good.
It does sound different. And there's something about just that tactile thing and making the point to just kind of slow down and say, okay, I have my iPod that has 20,000 songs and I can listen to it anytime. Or I can go throw on the new Bon Iver album and listen to the first side of it and then go over there and flip it and physically put the needle back on and just sit and only listen to the music.
The link to the past
feeling. You know?
Yeah.
And so I don't know. That's a beautiful thing, just to be able to slow down and do that. So
sure, or like handmade items.
Exactly, and so I think
getting something handmade, you feel so much. You want to take care of it more. It feels so much more special than getting something that's super super mass produced.
Right,
hitting up the IKEAs, if you will.
Right, getting some horse.
I'm slowly replacing my furniture, like one piece at a time. Replacing one IKEA piece with like a real piece. That's the goal.
Didn't IKEA get in hot water for putting like horse meat into their meatballs or something?
There was something like that.
And why does IKEA
weird
have
happened.
Meatballs?
Swedish meatballs? Is that what it is?
What's the deal with that? Like,
is it Swedish?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that's because you get hungry when you get lost in IKEA. You ever get lost in IKEA? They got arrows. They like tell you where to go.
So if there's arrows, how do you get lost?
Because I go off the beaten path.
See, that's your problem. You're too much of a rebel, Courtney.
You
just got to rein it in a little bit.
That's how crazy I get.
I know.
I wander the IKEA.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can get lost in there for hours. They have to serve food. They have to. For all the children's too. So all those children's wandering around the IKEA. It's nuts. It's nuts. So, music. You didn't touch on your music at all.
So I've...
From your transition too.
Yeah, sure.
From who you were before.
Oh, sure. Okay, so...
Go way back.
Well, so I grew up in a musical household. My mom taught piano and voice, and my parents split when I was 6. And so at my dad's house, it was all Creedence Clearwater and Jimi Hendrix and classic rock. And then at my mom's house, it was Les Miserables and Mahler and Dinah Washington and Ella Fitzgerald and Miles and Louis and artists like that. And so and then I was growing up in the Northwest in the early 90s. So I grew up with Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains and Soundgarden, and
it's a nice eclectic background.
It was a nice experience. And then I introduced myself to Tupac and Biggie and Wu-Tang and Naughty by Nature, and I just would obsessively watch Yo MTV Raps and shows like that, and I just thought they were they were really cool, first of all. And so when you're 8-9 years old watching this, you want to be like them.
MTV had those good shows back then.
Totally, yeah, they actually had music.
There was music on there. TRL.
But then I would listen to listen to the lyrics that Tupac was talking about.
Stop.
Or
Stop.
Things like that.
Yeah.
And so I quickly realized that in my opinion, hip hop had the ability to carry the most meaning in the shortest amount of time. And so I started writing raps when I was 13, which is a really popular thing to do in a fishing and logging town of 18,000 people, where everybody drives around with mud flaps that have Calvin pissing on the Honda logo or something like that.
So you get to be real unique.
Yeah. And so at the time, my mom was an elementary school teacher, and she had a dictionary in her house that was just one of those giant ones that had words that aren't really words.
Sure. Yeah.
And one of the words in there was alexipharmic, and it means an antidote to poison. And it had my name in it, and I knew it right then. I had it made, but I didn't also realize that marketing is an important thing, and being able to spell things, and being able to. Back then, you didn't have to worry about being able to Google something and things like that. So
wild.
So as time went on, I learned that was not a name that could really sit in the public sphere very easily. So after releasing a couple, not very good albums, you gotta start walking before you can run a 4-minute mile.
Of course.
After releasing some of those things, and going on putting together a tour senior year at Chapman when we were there, and learning a lot of trial by fire of how to exactly not run a tour is everything that I did. And that was also my first tour I'd ever done.
But how important is that? That's so important.
I got so much. I learned so much from that experience.
Absolutely. And think about how many people would want to do that and never do it because they're just scared to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's very cool.
Thanks. And, you helped a lot back then with building the website and...
Oh, my God.
Yeah, right?
Whoa.
Uh-huh.
I've completely forgot about that.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Dang. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, alexipharmic.net, I think it was. So, and, plus you were on the cover of American Beauty.
I was.
You were?
Yeah, that made me so nervous.
How'd you feel about that after that was out, though? And you're actually, your face is still, you can go to iTunes...
And
type
see
in
it
American
there?
Beauty in your faces.
Gosh, I've never done that.
Yeah, you should.
I've never done that. That's so funny, though. Well, cause I don't know. It made me nervous because I was like, me? Like, why? Me? That's my first thought.
Mm-hmm.
That's my first thought. But I was, super flattered.
Yeah. No, I mean, I thought the cover turned out great too.
That was a really cool cover with all of the little. It was like a mosaic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I contacted a photographer.
Yeah, it was really well done.
Taken a lot of incredible portraits, and they're all black and white. And I said, "Hey, here's my idea for this album, and can I use these?" And he said, "Yeah, absolutely," which is crazy because he should have licensed those for thousands of dollars, and he didn't charge me anything, that's cool. Which was wild. Anyways,
it did come out very cool though.
Yeah. So after that, I changed my musician name to Bodhi, Bodi, and went on a couple more tours. Got to make music with some artists that I really looked up to, that then became friends of mine, which was just one of those experiences that was just very surreal and humbling. And have had my own tour van, still have my tour van, still will be touring in the future. But it was really fun, and it still is. So my last album, my last full length, was called The Fall of Atlas. So Atlas being the Greek god that holds up the world. So the first track that I wrote for that was when I was working at that now no longer open Italian restaurant for 2 months. And I got this idea in my head that what if that dude just wanted to just not carry the world around anymore,
It seems like a lot of pressure.
Seems like a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
Just the fate of humanity rests on your shoulders.
It's a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
speaking of anxiety.
Right. And so I thought maybe he just wants to stop one day. And so I wrote his love letter / suicide note to the world. And so that's where that concept came from. So I wrote it as a Greek tragedy. The album's in 3 acts. There's a prologue, an epilogue, 3 interludes. There's a lot of Easter eggs in there for people to find the couple, I don't know how many people have that album now, maybe 1,000. So, but it was just an album that I wanted to make, you know? And so the next one, I'm really taking my time with it, and I'm really excited for when it's done. But that's going to be called Icarus Rises. So it'll be Fall of Atlas was the beginning of a trilogy. Icarus Rises is the second. Still figuring out what I want to title the third one exactly. But so Icarus was the guy who flew too close to the sun with wax wings and fell into the ocean and died. And so the whole moral of that story is not, kind of not getting too high on your own supply. Mm-hmm. And so this album is going to be much shorter than The Fall of Atlas, which was 18 tracks, but kind of about overcoming your own hubris, coming face to face with kind of what you've always thought you would be, and maybe still can be someday, and coupling that with how reality actually is right now, and being okay with that, and not giving up on your goals, but maybe rewriting a little bit what success means to you.
So important.
Yeah, and so that's what that album is. That's the overarching theme of that album. So
that's very cool. And I think that's probably a lot, that kind of thing of like, where I always say we have these stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves.
Totally, yeah.
Or like where we should be right now, or where we were supposed to be. Mm-hmm. And how little control sometimes we really have over that. Mm-hmm. And how we can take down a lot of the stress of our lives and the worry by kind of accepting this place that you're in, and accepting that it's an okay place to be, and constantly letting yourself rewrite what your story needs to be. And that is, it's almost like a release of resistance.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I don't want to be in a place in my life ever where I feel that I have to maintain some narrative because it is how it has been.
Yeah. Like I've always been this person, and this is the person people know me as, and what people tell me I am, and then you get trapped in that.
Exactly.
In that story.
I think the best thing we can do for ourselves sometimes is just get out of our own way and allow life to unfold as it is, rather than trying to make it conform to this very narrow, idealized version that I've set for myself.
Yeah.
When I started writing at 13, writing lyrics at 13, I was positive by the time I was 16, I was going to be huge, like huge. I knew it. And
then that youth right there.
And then suddenly I woke up and I was 20, and hadn't even released a song to the world. And I tell you, if you ever want to be humbled, release a rap song onto like a hip hop. Well, back in the day, it would have been a hip hop forum, like a forum. Release that, and then just see kind of what the public feedback is.
Oh gosh, public feedback is hard.
Totally. but that,
Just
you know,
look at the YouTube comments.
oh, that's the
Crazy
worst.
people on there.
Yeah.
Crazy people.
Yeah.
But that's what keeps so many people from even trying to do the things that they want to do in life is to worrying about what other people are going to say about it all the time.
And I totally, absolutely, completely understand that.
Yeah, because it can be super uncomfortable. But at the same time, it's like, it's like if you do something and you are super, super proud of it, that's like the only thing you have control over in that moment. And then you have to kind of accept whatever feedback comes back to you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can learn from that feedback. It's this hard part of trying not to take that feedback and let it stop you completely.
Right.
Where you just go, oh, well, I'm not good at it. Even if you're just starting something.
Right.
Right. And then you let this like first wave of like a little bit of critique come at you, and then you decide you're a failure.
And I think the reason that hurts so much is it because it disrupts that narrative that we were just talking about. And so if you take the chance and start doing those things, it's much easier just to be comfortable and kind of live a life of quiet desperation and not take those chances. But then once you do, you open yourself up to that. And so that narrative is already going to change. And so I remember one time reading on a message board, I just released a music video for a song. My first music video was for a song called Life. And it was actually filmed in Seattle. And one person wrote on the message board that they said, hey, this guy is going to be the next Macklemore. And this was in 2010, probably. No, 2009, I would say.
Okay.
So that was before Macklemore and Ryan Lewis, and
before he went all huge.
Yeah, and you know, and that's whole interesting. I mean, Ryan Lewis was the guy who took my very first press pictures and stuff like that. And,
really?
Yeah,
oh,
and
that's
I was
interesting.
back then. I was recording at Macklemore used to work with a guy named Budo, who was a guy that I used to work with as well, and so I was recording at their house for this album and things like that. Anyways, so on that message board, this guy said that he's going to be the next Macklemore, and somebody else said, no, it sounds like he raps like he has Down syndrome.
Oh.
And I thought, first of all, like, what does
that mean?
What does that mean? And also, what kind of, are we allowed to, can I swear on your podcast
Please.
at all? Or do you want to, what kind of asshole do you have to be to, like, put down somebody with Downs? Like
people don't even know what they're saying anymore sometimes.
I know. And this was 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Anyways,
it's gotten worse.
Right. And I also read one time that the worst rap album that anybody had ever heard in their life was by me. And it was by this other rapper that lived in Seattle who, I don't know what the motive was, but.
Well, it's crazy sometimes too, is I mean, like, people, if you think sometimes like about empathy, people don't think like what I'm about to say right now might actually hurt that person's feelings.
Right.
Even if they don't show me.
Right.
Even if I don't see it.
Right.
That could be actually pretty hurtful.
Right.
I might not want somebody to say something like that to me. That would throw me off.
Yeah. And
it feels like a lot of people have just forgotten about that. And it's like I'm very careful with my words and the things that I say to people, you know, because, and maybe it's because like I'm a sensitive person. So sometimes if I hear something a little weird from somebody, like, you know, like your brain almost wants to take the most negative thing you hear and replay it and go over it. Like we all do that kind of thing, right? So like I'm very mindful. I was talking to somebody the other day about, they were talking about how they'd never seen me mad, right? Mm-hmm. Never seen me mad. And I was like, you have. I'm just real quiet. I'm just one of those people that's real quiet. And say I was in something that's like an altercation of words, okay? Which does not happen very commonly for me. But even when I'm in an argument with somebody, they'll say something to me and I have to pause. I'll pause for several seconds and think about what I'm going to say back, because I know that you can't take certain things back. Because if I were to say something super negative, just to like, because sometimes people will say things to you, like just the worst thing they can think of, just to make it impact on you. Because they know it's going to hurt your feelings, right?
Right.
And I'm like, I don't want to say those things to people because I can't take that back.
That's good. I'm glad.
And say I'm arguing with somebody I actually care about. Like, you don't want to say something that they're going to remember forever that you said that thing, even if it just came from a place of spite.
Right.
But I mean, really, like on the internet, with people not even be able to see each other and they don't know each other and they don't have to see the repercussions of how somebody might feel when they say that, people just spout the worst possible things. They go all the way to 10 with negative comments.
Yeah.
And it's not necessary.
Yeah, of course.
It's not necessary.
And it's an insecurity thing for sure.
Sure.
Not that justifies it, but
no, but it's just a mindfulness thing.
yeah,
People should be more mindful,
and
or try to be at least.
my whole request for people is you don't have to go out and volunteer all your time at your local food bank or homeless shelter. You don't have to go do really selfless things. The least you can do is just not be a dick. Like if more people in the world just weren't like dicks to each other,
Just treat people how you want to be treated.
well, not even that. Like, because what if how you want to be treated is negatively? Like, what if you're very self?
Oh,
So
it's a strange complex there.
exactly. So just
Sure, they exist.
so everybody kind of objectively knows kind of what a dickish person is.
Yeah.
Just don't.
We
be
all
that.
have a sense.
Yeah, and and that's it. Like, that's
Sure.
my only.
Because you can choose
request
how
for
you react
people.
in situations.
Absolutely.
Even if you feel a certain way, just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean you have to take an action on that.
Absolutely.
You can
Yeah.
choose to do something different than that feeling.
The choice is always there. Happiness
Yes.
is a choice.
For
Suffering
people
is a
in
choice,
some sort of,
acting out
if you're in a connected mindset, of course.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
people forget that.
Yeah.
Feelings are strong, and some people just go with that
Right. Yeah. And act
All
on
the
that. And yeah. Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting concept for an album.
Well, for Icarus Rises,
Mhm.
and and then some of my favorite things that have happened have been through music too. And I'm certainly not a Billboard charting artist or by any means, but I meet people on tour that know the words to my songs and have given me handwritten letters because of what my music meant to them. And I mean, never in my wildest dreams of hoping for all this fame and fortune did I really leave room for that kind of impact. And to me, that's much more. I'd much rather have 100 of those letters than sell 1 million records. If I could have them both simultaneously, of course, that'd be great.
Sure.
But if I only have to have one or the other, then that's been some fun stuff right there too. So.
Yeah, it's nice to know that you've made an impact on somebody. That carries a lot of weight. But so now you're doing mostly photography and working on this documentary?
Yeah, and so music is certainly still there. It's just had to be backburnered for a little bit just to make room. From one of the big products of going back to the beginning of that trip in 2013, which was the whole year, was I came back with just a ton of pictures, and so I edited those down and have been selling them online and at farmers markets. And any shot that was from an orphanage, 100% of the profits go back to the orphanage.
Oh,
Shots
that's amazing.
from the trip that were like maybe at like Kruger Park, which is a national park in South Africa. So like maybe I was getting some shots of elephants or something. Then I keep that money because that helps me stay alive,
Yeah, that's important.
which is important. So anyway, so then building up that brand of Sattva Photo, his name, SATTVA, building up that brand has just taken a fair amount of time. And so I've started to do a lot more photography nationally too. So whether it's shooting portraits or weddings or concerts or product photography, it's all just practice to me, to hopefully catch the eye of somebody who's in charge of making the decisions at, say, Doctors Without Borders or Mercy Corps or the IRC. The goal is to eventually go be the staff photographer, say for Mercy Corps, and when they go send a team to do work in the Congo or South Sudan, actually be there on the ground, documenting it and taking pictures for them, and also learning the stories of and taking portraits of the people who they're helping, coming home and distributing that and just spreading more awareness. And the way I feel, if I see somebody's face and I know their story, you can't help but feel more connected to them. And the more connected we feel in the world, the more we're apt to want to help, or at least do no harm. So that's the goal eventually, is do that.
That's very cool. I didn't know that was because that's very specific and awesome.
Oh,
and really, most of this is on your own initiative because you're freelance.
Totally, yeah, I'm absolutely freelance.
And you've been building all this up yourself, so that's awesome that you've created that kind of a portfolio.
Appreciate
to
that.
keep getting more work. Yeah.
So, it's getting there. It's fun when I get a phone call from somebody who has been referred from somebody else. So it's getting there, and it's just kind of a snowball effect. So you just got to start small to build it up a little bit. And so where I am at this point this year versus where I am last year, many more clients, and opportunities and networking, and
That's what it's all about.
yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And then we're living in this time of like instant gratification.
Right. Right.
People forget that sometimes all you got to do is start somewhere and let it snowball.
Right.
And let it turn into what it's going to turn into.
Yeah.
But one opportunity leads to the next.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Which again, I'm going all in on it. But if 10 years from now it hasn't worked out, that's that narrative thing. I don't want to tell myself, well, I'm still this musician photographer. Maybe,
you don't want to let yourself get stuck anywhere.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But if that love is still there and I'm still able to provide and make ends meet, then I would rather keep doing that. And because certainly there's not a whole lot of money to be made in shooting for an NGO like that. But if that helps them out and it also builds up my brand a little bit, then I can go charge $5,000 to shoot a wedding.
Exactly.
And I can do 10 of those in the time that I'm home and fund the other trips.
That's very cool.
So I'd rather just live with a minimal bank account doing what I love, have the chance to do that than the opposite of that. So,
and that's, probably a better definition of success too. Letting yourself kind of flow from thing to thing to make it happen and following your passion and the things that you actually care about.
Right.
There's so many people that work in jobs where they make a lot of money, but like they feel no satisfaction from that.
Right.
Right. So this documentary that you're putting together, does that talk about like, well, what do you do in a normal day when you're volunteering?
Really depends on the country where I was, but wake up, around 6, help the kids get ready for school if they go to school. In Vietnam, it was vastly different. I was working with kids who were severely disabled as a product of generational mutations from Agent Orange from the Vietnam War.
Oh, wow.
And so that was in a Buddhist monastery. So those kids, certainly there's a huge language barrier, even if they did talk, but a lot of them didn't. So, if it's there, it's cleaning, helping with cooking, just being present and playing a game with them, just sitting and spending time and being a human with them. That was a lot of it. A lot of manual labor in different places. In Kenya, for example, they had the property at one of the orphanages had a couple cows and goat. I think they had goats and chicken. And so all of that animal runoff was going into a trench around the property that was soil on the bottom. And there was no hill, so it would just go in there and sit. And so that was just waiting to have mosquitoes and malaria come around. And so raised some money in a couple weeks from folks back home and was able to get enough to go get, concrete and things like that and literally be a poop smith for a week, shovel out all that.
Is that a real job there?
Well, that's what I had to do, and shovel out all that poop and then lay a concrete foundation around the whole trench. And then they had now a way to get the water out really quickly. So it would be stuff like that too.
Yeah,
and
it's
then
important stuff.
Yeah, and then in between, like just hang out with the kids, talk with the kids, have lunch with them, and
so if I just be a human with them,
yeah, not really.
That's great.
And not certainly when you're there, you don't have your cell phone out, and you're not carrying on a conversation with 75 other people who aren't actually with you and this kid. You're just there.
Yeah. Just being present.
Just being present, and yeah, that's usually what
Feels
it
like you have to
was
like make time to be present now.
right?
Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird? I was saying on the previous podcast, like I've been meditating a little bit in the morning and a little bit at night, just to give myself some specific time to myself to be in the moment to kind of assess what's going on. But I'm like, that's so funny. It feels like so many people feel the need to do that now. Yeah. Especially, kind of in the world we live in, I guess, because we have so many distractions.
We do. I was listening to, I can't remember where I heard this, but we actually have more free time because we have all these conveniences, but we fill it with so much more stuff.
Yes.
And so I think well, I don't think, I know it's very important to just be able to slow down and be in that present moment. I think you would really like taking a Vipassana retreat.
That's what I talked about this with the last guy.
Seriously?
He had done one.
Okay, yeah.
And so that's officially like the fourth person that said that to me.
Okay.
So, the universe is sending me a sign clearly that I should look into this.
So for people that don't know what a Vipassana retreat is, it's just, there's no religion to it. It's just, supposedly it's the kind of meditation that the Buddha did to become the Buddha, insight meditation. And so the first Vipassana retreat that I did, and I don't know if it's the same everywhere, but it was 10 days. It was silent 24/7, and you meditate 10 hours a day. So for the first 40 hours of meditation, all you do is focus on the feeling of air going into your nose and out as you meditate, and you just focus your mind on that. So the purpose is to kind of cage your monkey mind, and every tangential thing it tries to go into, you still allow it to, but then you notice what your mind is doing. So you're kind of a third man outside of your brain.
You become an observer of your mind. Yeah.
Then you're able to just kind of rein it back to the present moment. Then it goes off again, and you bring it back to the present moment. And I would highly recommend that for most people. I think you'd really enjoy that. And
yeah, I go a little nuts. Really enjoy it. I think I'd do both.
It's horrible. I mean, days 5, 6, and 7, when you think I have another 50 hours of meditation to go through, and you think it's never going to happen, and your knees are just shot, and your ankles are hurting.
Well, because I'm one of those. Even me taking that time to do that little bit of meditation that I do every day, is a big deal for me, because I'm one of those people that has I need constant sound. Like I sleep with the TV was still on. We came back. I sleep with the TV on. Most of the time lately, I've got headphones in, and I've either got music going, or I'm listening to a podcast, or I'm listening to an audiobook. And so there's a lot of times that I don't let my mind just exist by itself, because I'm always taking stuff in, and I don't know if that's like a nervousness thing, because sometimes I don't want to let my mind wander.
Right.
I don't want to.
Right.
It's crazy in there.
Are you afraid of going to a dark place or something? Or no, I mean really, what?
I mean, I have the tendency to overthink.
Okay. And
so I think I'm just have to be a little bit conscious of that time, so that I don't let myself get in too much of a circle.
Gotcha.
You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And take things that I personally think I think we all have pretty good instincts for the most part. Like, most people have pretty good instincts. We've just kind of forgotten how to listen to them sometimes. Because when I look back at a lot of things, like I can think of events where I've had good instinct about what I needed to do or what I should have done. And then it went over and over and over again in my mind until I made myself doubtful. When really I could have just looked inward a little bit, kind of trusted my own instinct and my intuition. And run with it without all the other little stress and worry that I put on myself from running in that circle for a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So I think it's just that I tend to overthink, and I can create worry where there shouldn't be any.
Yeah, totally.
And so me even taking those moments, I'm letting my mind do what it does, but I'm watching it.
Right.
And I'm seeing where it is, and I'm trying to be able to recognize those loops and be able to, even if they happen, to recognize and go, oh, you're doing it. And then cut it off.
That's it's a great thing.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Personal mind control.
Right. And then
PMC,
and then you'll
if you will.
expand to controlling everybody else's mind.
Oh, that's too much pressure for me. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right.
So not today or in the future, but
so no time ever.
I'm enough trouble.
Right.
Just handling me. You know what I mean? But yeah, I don't know. I think that's helpful for anybody if you at least try to see what patterns that you have in your thought process, and see which ones aren't healthy or not helping you in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
And find new ones and make new habits too. Breaking them habits. Not scrolling through your Instagram for 7 hours.
Right.
Mindlessly.
Right.
Realizing you could have done something productive. You know what I mean? That's funny to hear that you do that too. Because I feel like you'd be so enlightened you don't do that stuff.
Well, and
I always think of you as like a pillar of positivity.
Really?
And Yes, I have.
Oh.
I speak very highly of you.
Oh, well, thank you.
I don't know if you know that, but I always speak very highly of you and the things that you have done. Not everybody would go volunteer in orphanages and do all these things that you've done. So it's very cool, you know. But so it's interesting to see that you fall into those same kinds of traps.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to recognize it, and
That's half the battle.
Well, yeah, but I think we kind of romanticize. It's easy to kind of fall into thinking about simpler times, but even when our parents were our age, there was still people would, instead of scrolling through your phone, you'd sit and read the newspaper for 2 hours.
Yeah,
or you'd
different
watch,
kinds of distractions.
Yeah, and so that stuff always existed. Like if I think back on like being at the airport now versus 15 years ago, it's not that everybody was just having conversations and the sun was smiling down on everybody and people were just singing together and just really being human and connected. No, people were still buying magazines and doing the crossword puzzle in the back of People magazine, and now it's the same thing. It's still filled with other stuff. So I think it's important to cut ourselves a little bit of a break and say, as people, we've always, taken up things that are, pastimes. And there's a reason why that word is called pastime,
because we are passing that.
Exactly. So this is just a new way of doing it. But I think you can be mindful in how you use those distractions. And so I can be more mindful in how I use my phone. So it's getting there. Certainly more work to be done. But
yeah, I think humans are still just adjusting to it.
Right.
We're adjusting to all of a sudden this huge influx of information that's available.
Right.
Constantly. So you have a good handle on dealing with struggles and obstacles, I feel like.
Okay.
So if you feel like you get into some sort of you go through something difficult, you go through a hard time, what is your kind of process of getting your mind back into a good place?
I let myself really feel it.
Mm-hmm.
Really feel the emotions, not run away from it, but also not let them consume me. Allow myself to feel sad or to feel angry, but I don't have to be sad or be angry. So allowing that to happen and really kind of leaning into those emotions and understanding what's beneath them. Like, what is the thing that made me sad? If it's sometimes there's more of a meaning to it. If it's just, sometimes there's not more of a meaning to it. Sometimes, if a friend of mine died, there's not more meaning to that. It's just a friend of mine died, and that's sad. But if there's something else where, say like my ego is hurt for some reason and I'm sad by that, that's the actual reason, and there's more to it than that, and it's just, maybe that's not actually sadness. Maybe it's actually embarrassment, which is, So lean into that, and then I think there's power into understanding that people that I look up to have been through far worse, and that my problems aren't unique, and that's not to minimize them. If something hurts, it still hurts.
No, but it's so important.
But there's a power in realizing, hey, other people have gone through similar and come out the other side okay. And realizing that, and for me personally, death is a hugely motivating factor. Certainly all of us at one point or another are going to go. We don't know when. And so that being the case, I mean, this thing that's really bugging me right now, is it that big of a deal to where I really need to forsake the next 2 days or 2 weeks or whatever being really caught up in it? Like, is it where I could be present in the moment with whoever I'm with and just be a good friend for somebody? Like, is it really that much more important? Usually the answer is no. And usually that helps me move on from it.
That's great. That's a great way to think of it. Tell everybody where they can find you.
Sure.
And hear about your new documentary that you're going to be working on and your album. Yeah.
So the documentary will be called Moja Maisha, which is a Swahili phrase that means one life. So those will be released in segments. The South Africa one, I'm just finishing up music on it, so still figuring out if I'm going to market it before I release it or just release it and then get marketing after the fact. That being said, people can keep tabs on that at thevolunteeradventure.com. The word "the" is in the URL as well. So thevolunteeradventure.com. My photography is Sattva Photo, SATTVA photo.com. And that's also my handle for Instagram and Facebook. And I don't think I have any others. And then for my music, Bodhi, BODI. Thisisbodhi.com. And that's the same on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook for those personas. So those places. And then thisisbodhi.com.
Perfect.
Yeah.
This has been amazing.
Thanks for taking the time.
So good to see you.
Likewise.
Yeah. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
And I'll talk to you guys next time.
Keep up the good work.
He's a good guy, that one. And it was amazing to see him after so long. If you guys enjoyed this conversation, share it with your friends, subscribe, or take a quick second to leave a nice rating on iTunes. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Courtney Diamond for any updates to my blog, which you can find at CourtneyDiamond.com, or to keep up with news on the podcast. If you guys ever have any questions or topics you'd like to hear about on the podcast, get in touch with me through my site or social media, because I'd love to hear from you. I hope you guys are having an amazing day, and I'll talk to you soon.